back to Breakfast with Bill on Tuesday here on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. So glad to be with you guys again this week and honored that you find some time for us. We had a poll up last week, which was something new for us, and Evan had put something out asking everybody what you wanted to talk about this week. And the runaway winner was prospecting in our new time. So here we find ourselves in the midst of all the craziness of 2020. And as salespeople, we still have some work to do, which means we still have to get in front of people and have conversations. Not so easy, right? When nobody's in the office, everybody says. And not so easy when the phone is dead, as so many people have told us, because, cold calling's dead, right? And the phone's dead. And we just need to become really creative as online social marketers. I don't think that's true. I think that the phone may be more relevant and more powerful now than it's been in a long time. And the reason for that is people are available. And we find that if we have people's cell phone numbers, and so many people have their office lines directed to their cell phone numbers now, that it's easier to get in touch with people. It's easier to actually connect with people. And the people we're trying to reach, they're certainly busy. They're certainly in a lot of Zoom meetings and online meetings, but people are answering their phone. They really are answering their phone, and it makes it a little easier for us to connect with them. Now, a lot of times when they're answering their phone, they're answering it in anger, right? Because like, oh my God, if this is about my car warranty again, I swear I'm going to kill them. And, but they're answering. And if they started angrily and they pick up the phone expecting it to be somebody they don't want to talk to, and we engage them and approach them in a professional manner, I think we have a leg up from where we used to be. And when we do that, if we do get somebody that picks up the phone and answers for us, I think it's important to always check and make sure it's an okay time for them. Too often as salespeople, when we're making cold calls, we get somebody that answers and we just leap right into everything we wanted to tell them. And we start turning the fire hose on and dumping information on them. And, if you've ever been on the other end of one of those calls, you're just waiting for somebody to take a breath so you could tell them this is a bad time, right? Or you could move on. And that's why I love asking people early on if we're catching them at a bad time. So it's one of these engagements that when we ask, am I catching you at a bad time? Somebody has to respond to us. So we're getting them engaged in the conversation. And if they say, no, what's up? I got a couple minutes. Then we have some time to talk. If they say, yeah, actually, I'm getting ready to walk into a meeting, we have an opportunity to ask when's a better time to call them back. But we only get that opportunity if we put them first and we start to think about them as individuals, not as objects to which we're trying to sell something, right? And remember, sales is something we do for someone, not to someone. So if we're really engaged and worried about what's important to the other, then we're going to ask them and make sure, is this a good time or bad time? So I love asking somebody, am I catching you at a bad time, whenever they pick up the phone. And once we get them and they say that they might have a few minutes, be mindful of a few minutes, right? Because our goal in those calls, as we prospect now more than ever, is to get somebody sharing with us, not push on them. And we have an opportunity to be authentic now. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. But be mindful also if somebody doesn't pick up the voicemail, right? Because I know that voicemails get a bad rap these days, and a lot of people don't even listen to them. I get it. But there are people that will. There are people that will listen to the voicemail. Many people are going to read the text. So I like to think of voicemails as our personal branding statement, right? When we find ourselves in someone's voicemail, we want to actually leave a voicemail. Don't hang up. Sometimes we talk to organizations that think, oh, I have my people call, and when they get voicemail, I make them hang up and call back later in an hour or 2 hours, whatever. Imagine walking back to your desk and looking at your caller ID or looking at your cell phone and your caller ID, and you have 8 calls in a day from the same number, but they never left you a voicemail. What are you going to think about that number? When that number pops up on your screen next time, do you think it's real? Do you think it's a professional business call? Or are you going to be thinking that this is just more spam? So I'm a big fan of leaving a voicemail that first time. And we leave a voicemail remembering that it's actually our personal branding statement. Because when somebody listens to that, they're going to start to connect with our tone. They connect with our approach. They connect with our engagement level. So when we leave 3, 4, 5, 6 voicemails for somebody over the course of 3, 4 weeks, they start to know us. So when we do catch them on the phone 2, 3, 4 weeks from now, they're like, "Hey, Bill, how you doing?" And they almost feel like you have a relationship with them because they've heard those calls. I know that's been my experience. And when people take that approach of always just sharing the brand and not reminding me of how many times they've called me, right, and how many times I've failed to call them back, then I'm much more appreciative. So if you find yourself leaving voicemails for the same person several times, please never remind them that this is the 5th voicemail I've left for you, and I'm really anxious to hear from you, because that doesn't start the relationship off on the positive tone that we need it to. It's much more effective to just let them know, "Hey, Bill, hope you're well, continuing to reach out and see how we can help. Please feel free to call me at your convenience at this number. And oh, by the way," this is an important piece of voicemails, "oh, by the way, I'll be sending you an email because that might be easier for you to connect." And big fan of voicemails and emails going out 2 by 2, right? It's almost biblical. We have to go out 2 by 2. So make sure that we're sending the email with the voicemail, the follow-up on the voicemail, and let people know that they can connect with us via email as well as voicemail. And then whenever we do find people, remember, right now more than ever, people are desperate for connections. We have connections with people via Zoom, and we're having these, but we're still, I think many of us who are extroverts are still desperate for connections. So make sure we're being authentic when we reach out and we catch somebody on the phone and we're having these conversations when we're prospecting. Be authentic, be genuine, be yourself. Don't worry about putting on the facade and pretending like we're living in a bubble and none of the craziness that's going on around us is going on. That doesn't work. Just catch people in the moment and ask them how they're dealing with certain things now, right? If you're selling advertising, as one of our clients does, as an example, when you get somebody on the phone and after you ask them, "Am I catching you at a bad time?" and they say, "No, what's going on?" You let them know. Say, "Hey, we're working in digital ad space, and a lot of our clients are worried about how do they generate new customers or new visits or new whatever. How are you dealing with that right now? Or how is what we're going through change some of the goals of your ad campaigns?" Be authentic. Let's be realistic about what we're going through, and people will connect with you in a more real way. And then when we're making phone calls to those who we know, and we're connecting with customers, we're connecting with current clients, the most important thing we can share with them is our vulnerability, right? Don't be the macho folks that are acting like nothing's happening or you're great and everyone else is hurting. Be vulnerable, be open. We don't want to become Debbie Downers and tell everybody everything that's wrong in our life, but let people know how you're really doing. And I can tell you nothing creates intimacy with somebody, with a friendship or a client relationship, more than vulnerability. And when we demonstrate we're vulnerable, we actually demonstrate that we're human. Evan, you say it looks like you have something for us.
Yeah, we got a couple comments and questions early this morning. First of all, good morning to Peter Clark. He said, "I will pass." I think he's agreeing with you that if someone leaves him a bunch of voicemails, he's not going to get back to them. We also had a question from our friend Lori Barkman. She said, how have companies adjusted from a business development and sales perspective, and are in-person sales calls a thing of the past?
Wow, great question. Thanks, Lori. So I'll address the second question first. I don't know if in-person sales calls are a thing of the past, but they're not really a thing of the present, right? And we find that most of the work that's happening now is being done remote. So we've all had to become much more effective in using Zoom and Microsoft Teams as we use here. We have to become very flexible and effective with these tools because most places won't allow visitors right now, and most of us can't get in to see our clients face to face. I don't think that's a thing of the past. I think that's going to come back. I don't think it's going to come back before the end of the year. We are seeing an uptick in people willing to come and see us. We have some clients that are asking if we're accepting visitors in our office. And if so, they'd love to come here and meet. We also have the advantage here of having a porch, so we can have people come in and have outdoor meetings. It's essentially an outdoor conference room for us. And people are very comfortable there, but people are looking for that new the normalcy, reestablishing some of that togetherness. So I don't think they're a thing of the past, not a thing of the present, but I do think they're going to come back, and we'll see as the pandemic starts to calm down through either treatments or vaccination, people more willing to be in person again. The first part of that question about how have companies adjusted from a business development and sales perspective, well, the first is people have had to become very astute with using online tools, which means that a lot of people have had to start developing new materials. For a lot of folks that are used to going out and having face-to-face meetings with folks and not having to rely on either PowerPoint or visuals to help tell the story, we've seen people looking to develop more of those to make those online meetings more effective. So, that's one area. The other area has become, we've found, is that activity levels of sales teams are now skyrocketing because we have no wasted time with travel. We have no wasted time with, especially for those sales teams that are flying all over the place. People are actually picking up days of productivity. And we find that they're having more detailed discovery meetings and business planning meetings with their clients. So, I think for salespeople that find they have an increase in time because they're lacking travel or they're homebound and the day is increasing, use that time wisely to focus on activity. We always talk about the revenue generating activities versus just activities. Focus on the revenue generating activities. And revenue generating activities are those 2 or 3 things, 3 or 4 things maybe, that lead to revenue. Right? They're not just making phone calls, but they could be things like meetings. So having great meetings that are now online versus in person. They could be gaining referrals. We love asking for referrals. Most people are afraid to ask for referrals. It's very easy to ask for a referral, right? If you're in front of somebody and you're doing a great job for them, ask them how things are going. Because very rarely do we ask our clients, how's it going? We just like to think it's great, and it's always great until we find out they're going out for an RFP, or it's always great until we find out that they're making a switch. So we like to find out a little earlier and actually ask them, say, hey, how are we doing? How's it going? And if you hear things are going great, especially now, it's a very easy time to ask for a referral, because if someone says you're doing a great job for them, guess what we get to say? Great. Who's the 1 or 2 people in your network you think we could help? Doesn't have to be, the old insurance method of sliding a piece of paper across the table and saying, can you give me 5 names of people I can call? Or it doesn't have to be an abundance of referrals. We want 1. Who's the 1 or 2 people I can help? And when you ask who's the 1 or 2 people I can help, it's a lot easier for somebody to give you a name than who's the 1 person or who's the 5 people I can call and say you referred me. So think about now, if we're doing a good job for our folks, it should be an easier time than ever to ask for referrals. So, excuse me. So one thing too, and this kind of dovetails on Lori's question, is when we think about what should we be doing now and what are great salespeople doing now, I find they're working with intentionality, right? There's not many accidental days for the great sales rep. Accidental days are the days where we just think we're being busy and we move around doing a lot of stuff. Evan and I were talking earlier about the people we all know that are world class at moving fast but get nothing done, right? And they're in perpetual motion and they're always wearing their busy buttons and they're always telling the world how busy they are, but they're not getting anything accomplished. We have a lot of sales reps like that we see. The great sales reps have found an opportunity now to be intentional. So they're intentional about their days. They plan their days, right? They plan their calls. Now, if you like scripting, great, write yourself a script. I'm not a huge fan of scripting. I like bullet points, but make sure you have those so you know what you want to generate in the call, what you want to communicate in that call, and what you want to ask in that call. Because great cold calls or great introductory calls, it's more about what we ask than what we tell, right? Remember, what they have to tell us is always more important than what we have to tell them. So be intentional, plan your day, plan your calls. And also, this might sound like it's a contradiction, but as you're being intentional, be able to pivot. Because I'll tell you the one thing I don't do well enough, and that is when somebody comes into my mind, call them right now. We had a client of ours a couple years ago that every year had a sales theme, and they're, have had great years. They've had 4 or 5 consecutive record years where they just keep building year over year over year. They're an incredible team. And a couple years ago, the theme for the year that we came up with was just pick up the phone. Because all we talked about was what's the right email? How do I get somebody to answer? How do I get somebody to schedule time? And we finally just landed on just pick up the phone. When you're thinking of somebody, pick up the phone and call them. And if somebody pops into your head, whether it's a friend, family member, prospect, client, whatever, referral source, we call those COIs, centers of influence. Whenever somebody pops into your head, call them, because they popped into your head for a reason. And, one of the things I tend to do, which is one of my flaws, and here I'm being vulnerable, as I told you to be vulnerable earlier, but one of my flaws is when I think of somebody that's important to me and I care about and I want to reach out to them, you know what I do with it? I write it in my day timer. I'll call them. I write down to call them. Why? Why not just pick up the phone and call them and let them know I'm thinking of them and let them know they're important? Because they were put on my heart and put in my mind for a reason, right? So, as we're real to each other, as we treat each other more as humans now than I think we ever have, because we're seeing I don't know what the word is, but we're seeing how fragile maybe this whole thing is, right? Our whole ecosystem and life itself, as we experience this fragility, I think we're all being more human to each other. So be human. If somebody's on your heart and in your mind, call them. Please call them, because they were put there for a reason. So I think that's going to wrap it up. Evan, we don't have any more questions, right?
We do have another one from email, if you'd like to answer that.
Sure.
I know you might need a coffee break there. It is breakfast with Bill after all, so.
Yeah, I didn't get to order my pancakes yet, and my throat was getting a little raw. So.
Yeah, I could tell. This one, not sure if it's super relevant, but I think it's a very interesting question. The question is, what is the difference between high potential and high performance?
Actually, that's a great question. We'll touch on that now and maybe go into more detail on that one next week if there's an interest for that. But when we look at high potential, the potential is, I would think of potential, is that which is yet unused or untapped, right? So when we look at somebody and we say they have a high upside, that's the high potential. When you look at the high performance, it's people that are actually delivering for us. And if somebody's delivering and they're maxed out and they're using up all their potential, great. We call that being the best version of yourself, right? So I think people that are delivering high performance are on that path of actually being becoming and being the best versions of themselves. Too often when we talk about high potential, those individuals, that sometimes could be code for not performing, especially not performing up to what we would expect. And that requires us as leaders and as sales leaders to give them a growth plan. I always like to say the most loving thing we can do as a sales leader is help someone meet quota, right? Help them be successful, not be kind to them, not let them continue to fail. Nobody wants to wake up every morning and know they're going into the office to fail again. So when we think about potential, it often can be extracted from people and help them achieve more if we give them proper expectations. And expectations are not quotas, right? Quotas, performance metrics, they're all the what. That's what we expect of somebody. Expectations are more the how. How do we do that, right? So as a leader, if you can think about the expectations you have of your team, they should start with action words, and they should have a measurement and a unit of time in them. An example would be arrive by 8 a.m. every day, right? So it's not good enough to say be at work or by 8 a.m., right? It has to say arrive and be ready to work by 8 a.m. every day, because that's the expectation. So When we think about potential, oftentimes we could pull that out of people with the right expectations. And if you have a challenge where you're looking at somebody's potential versus their performance, a great exercise to go through is a 9-box exercise. We've recently gone through this with one of our clients, actually, over the past couple of weeks, where we've looked at their sales organization, and the 9 block says, here's my performance vector, or my performance axis, and my potential axis. And those that are low performers with low potential, they're not going to be long for your organization. They're not helping advance the cause. Then you get into those that have moderate potential and moderate performance, and you think about, okay, some of those are just steady players, and we need those. But then you get into your high potentials, the folks that you really want to invest in and build your future on are those ones that have high potential and are more leaning towards high performance. So, Evan, we think that answered that question?
Yeah, I think you did a incredible job of answering that. I do want to put you on the spot with one more question.
Sure.
What do you think we're going to talk about next week?
Ooh, I don't know. Maybe it's going to be potential and performance, and how we craft some expectations for our salespeople and for ourselves so that we can achieve the things we want to achieve. Remember, accountability is that one thing everybody needs and nobody wants, and that includes ourselves. So if we have no one else to be accountable to, then maybe we have to start holding ourselves accountable to ourselves. So, Evan, thank you for that. And between now and then, we invite you guys to visit our website, telericogroup.com. And in the upper right-hand corner, there's a button that says Total Growth. That's our podcast. I'd encourage you to follow that, subscribe, please. And just yesterday, Evan and I had an opportunity to record a podcast on this topic of prospecting today. So it'll give you a little more insight, a little more depth, and maybe reinforce some of the things we talked about today. So as always, thank you guys so much for your time. It's an honor to be with you for these past 23 minutes. Hope you have a great day. God bless you all. Be well. Stay healthy.